Picture this. You're standing inside a dark, flickering cave. The walls are covered in handprints and strange symbols. In the center, a shallow pit is filled with bones, not scattered, not discarded, but carefully arranged. Who placed them here? And more importantly, why? When it comes to the dead, we often assume cavemen were primitive, tossing bodies aside without thought. But the truth, what our ancestors actually did with their dead, will shock you, challenge your assumptions, and reveal a side of early humans you never imagined. Imagine stumbling into a cave tens of thousands of years old. The ground is cold, the air damp, and in the silence, you find something chilling: bones, not scattered randomly but placed with purpose. Some are tucked into shallow pits. Others are surrounded by stones, tools, or even traces of red ochre pigment. This isn't just nature at work. This is evidence of thought, of intention, of a ritual, and it challenges everything we once believed about so-called primitive humans. For decades, scientists assumed early humans and Neanderthals lived only for survival, hunting, gathering, escaping predators. Death, in this view, was just another event, bodies, left behind, forgotten. But archaeological discoveries have flipped that assumption upside down. In sites like Shanadar Cave in Iraq, remains of Neanderthals show hints of deliberate burials. Some skeletons appear carefully placed, with flowers or pollen grains suggesting a kind of funeral offering. Think about that. A Neanderthal, a species once considered brutish and unfeeling, may have laid a loved one to rest with flowers. Doesn't that sound human? And it wasn't just Neanderthals. Early Homo sapiens also left behind burial sites that defy the idea of cold indifference. At Kofsa Cave in Israel, for example, skeletons dating back over 90,000 years were found buried alongside deer antlers and tools. These weren't random objects, they were symbolic. They meant something, even if we'll never fully decode the message. So what does this tell us? It tells us that death was never just about disposal. From the very beginning, it was about memory, meaning, and maybe even spirituality. These burials whisper to us across millennia, saying, "We felt loss, too." This is the first clue in unraveling the mystery of what cavemen really did with their dead, not discarding them like waste, but treating them with a strange, almost sacred respect. The more caves archaeologists explored, the more the evidence piled up literally. Graves weren't isolated accidents. They were patterns, repeated across continents and over tens of thousands of years. Take the famous La Chapelle site in France. Here, a Neanderthal skeleton was discovered in a carefully dug pit. The body was positioned as if intentionally placed, not left to decay on the surface. Now, picture what that means. Someone had to stop, dig, and arrange the burial. That's a remarkable shift in thinking. Why waste precious energy in a brutal survival world unless it truly mattered? And it wasn't only about burial pits. Some caves revealed bones painted with red ochre, a natural pigment that still stains the earth today. That splash of color wasn't random. Many researchers believe ochre symbolized life, blood, or rebirth. In other words, cavemen may have believed in something beyond death, an afterlife, or at least a transition. Of course, scientists debate these interpretations. Was it really ritual, or just practical? Maybe covering bodies helped with hygiene, or protected the group from disease. Maybe ochre was a way to preserve remains, not to honor them. But here's the twist. Even if it began as practicality, somewhere along the line it became meaningful. Humans don't just do things, we assign meaning to them. Think about how we still handle death today. We wear black at funerals, place flowers on graves, and keep personal items of those we've lost. To someone far in the future, digging through our remains, those acts might look like strange rituals, maybe even mysterious. Yet for us, they carry deep emotional weight. Isn't it possible that's exactly what we're seeing in these ancient caves? These burials reveal something crucial. Cavemen weren't just survivors. They were thinkers, mourners, and possibly dreamers of worlds beyond their own. Their caves weren't only shelters. They became the first cemeteries, silent testaments to the dawn of human culture. What's fascinating is that these early burials weren't just about the dead, they were about the living. Imagine being part of a small tribe, no more than a few dozen people, and losing one of your own. In a world already hostile and uncertain, the death of a hunter, a child, or even an elder would have shaken the group deeply. Laying that person to rest wasn't only practical, it may have been a way of healing together, of saying goodbye. Some researchers believe these rituals marked the first spark of shared identity. By burying their dead, cavemen may have been strengthening bonds, uniting the tribe through grief. Each burial was like a silent story, reminding everyone, we belong together, even when life ends. And the symbolism only grew more complex. At Sungir, a site in Russia, archaeologists uncovered 2 children buried over 30,000 years ago. Their graves were covered with thousands of ivory beads, painstakingly carved, along with spears and ornaments. Think about that. People spent countless hours creating objects for the dead time that could have been used hunting, building, or surviving. Why make such a sacrifice unless death carried profound meaning? These discoveries flipped the old stereotype of cavemen as mindless brutes. They weren't just reacting to nature. They were shaping culture, inventing ritual, and perhaps even planting the seeds of religion. But here's where the mystery deepens. If some burials were so elaborate, why do others seem careless or even violent? In certain caves, bodies weren't buried at all, they were butchered, burned, or broken. Were these signs of different tribes, different beliefs, or something darker? The truth is, the story of cavemen and death isn't a single narrative. It's a puzzle with pieces missing, scattered across time. And as we move forward, we'll uncover the more unsettling side of this mystery when reverence for the dead collides with fear, survival, and the unknown. If some cavemen honored their dead with flowers and beads, others treated death very differently, sometimes brutally. Archaeologists digging into prehistoric sites have found bones that tell a darker story. Skulls cracked open, long bones split, marrow scraped clean. This isn't the result of burial or ritual care, it's evidence of cannibalism. In caves across Europe, such as Goyet Cave in Belgium, Neanderthal remains show cut marks and fractures almost identical to those on animal bones. To put it plainly, some of the dead were eaten. Now, was this survival cannibalism during desperate times of famine? Or could it have been ritual taking in the strength of the dead? We may never know, but the fact remains. Not every body was treated with respect. And then there are the burn sites. At certain locations, remains were charred by fire, suggesting cremation or perhaps attempts to destroy the dead out of fear. Imagine living in a world where disease spread icily, predators lingered nearby, and the dead could feel like both a threat and a mystery. Fire might have been seen as purification, or as protection. This complexity paints a picture of cavemen not as a single-minded group, but as diverse societies with wildly different views on death. Some saw it as sacred, others as a danger, and still others as an opportunity for survival. What makes this so gripping is that it mirrors our own contradictions. Even today, across cultures, death is handled in radically different ways. Burial. cremation, sky burials, mummification. For cavemen, those choices were just beginning to take shape. They were experimenting, improvising, and perhaps inventing beliefs on the fly. So here's the question. Were these acts driven by necessity or by belief? Were cavemen rational survivors, or the first spiritual thinkers haunted by death's mystery? The next part takes us even deeper into how death itself shaped the birth of culture, storytelling, and maybe even religion. Death wasn't just a physical event. For cavemen it was a mystery they couldn't ignore. Imagine watching a member of your tribe lying motionless, never rising again. No breath, no sound, no warmth. For early humans, who had no science or medicine, this must have felt both terrifying and unexplainable. And from that fear, questions began to grow. Where did they go? Are they still with us? Will it happen to me? This is where culture starts to take root. Some researchers believe that confronting death may have been the spark that led to myths, rituals, and even the idea of an afterlife. Think about it. The first time someone buried a body with flowers or painted bones with red ochre, they were doing more than just hiding decay. They were expressing an idea that life had meaning beyond its end. And meaning is powerful. Death may have pushed cavemen to develop storytelling as a way to make sense of loss. A story about a hunter's spirit traveling to the sky. A tale of ancestors watching from the mountains. These weren't just stories. They were tools of survival. They gave comfort, unity, and purpose to the living. At the same time, fear of death may have inspired rules and taboos. Perhaps certain caves became sacred spaces where the dead rested, and no one dared disturb them. Perhaps the fire rituals weren't just about disposal, but about keeping dangerous spirits away. Every ritual, whether rooted in reverence or fear, carried weight, and slowly, these practices wove the fabric of early culture. When you look at it this way, cavemen weren't only the first to bury their dead. They were the first to ask the big questions. What happens when we die? What does it mean to live? And in seeking those answers, they began the long journey that would eventually shape religion, philosophy, and human identity itself. But before we see this as purely noble, we have to face the darker reality. Sometimes, death was not honored, but exploited. That's where the final part of this chapter takes us. For all the reverence and ritual, the story of cavemen and the dead was never simple. In some cases, death was treated not as sacred, but as a resource. At El Cave in Spain, researchers uncovered Neanderthal bones with clear signs of butchering, marrow extraction, and even possible cooking. To the living, the dead may have been seen as food in times of desperation. It's a chilling reminder that survival often outweighed sentiment. But even this tells us something important. Death was powerful. Whether honored, feared, or consumed, it demanded a response. Cavemen couldn't just ignore it. Every choice burial, burning, cannibalism, or ritual shaped the way their societies understood life itself. And maybe that's the real secret hidden in these caves. Death wasn't just an end, it was a teacher. It forced early humans to stop, to think, to feel. It pushed them toward ideas of community, of morality, of meaning. In a way, our ancestors' encounters with death may have been the very thing that made us human. Consider this. Without those first burials, would we have developed religion? Without those first rituals, would we have built cultures that honor ancestors and carry traditions forward? Without the shadow of death, would we have even learned to value life? It's strange, isn't it? The bones of the long-dead, silent, fragile, scattered in caves, still speak volumes about who we are today. They tell us that even in the harshest times, early humans weren't just surviving. They were questioning, experimenting, and searching for meaning in the one thing no one could escape. So when we ask, what did cavemen really do with the dead? The answer isn't simple. They buried, they honored, they feared, they consumed. But above all, they transformed death into something larger, a mystery that shaped the birth of human culture itself. So, what did cavemen really do with their dead? They didn't just discard them as we once imagined. They buried them with flowers and beads, painted them with ochre, burned them in fire, and sometimes even consumed them. Death, for our ancestors, was never just an ending. It was a puzzle, a force, a teacher. It shaped how they saw the world, how they bonded as tribes, and how they first began asking questions that still haunt us today. When you stand inside those ancient caves, staring at the careful burials or the butchered bones, you realize something incredible. The story of death is also the story of us. The way early humans faced mortality laid the foundation for culture, religion, and meaning itself. In their silence, the dead of the past are still whispering. This is where humanity began. And maybe the biggest twist of all is this. When we look at those burials, we're not just studying cavemen. We're seeing the very first reflections of ourselves. If this journey into the deep past made you see cavemen in a new light, let me know what you think. Do you believe they were honoring their dead out of love, or simply surviving through necessity? Drop your thoughts in the comment side. Love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoy exploring the hidden side of human history, make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who loves a good mystery. Because trust me, there are plenty more secrets buried in the caves of our past, just waiting to be uncovered.